It's the midway point of the WNBA fantasy season. 6 weeks completed, 5 more until the playoffs. There have been a lot of changes in rotations across the league this month, thanks to injuries and Eurobasket. And as we enter the first week of July, the Eurobasket players will mostly be back on their teams. Sorry, Julie Van Loo. And as an owner of a few of those players, I will say, not a moment too soon. Today, I want to look at a few players who have struck my eye as either buy or sell candidates for the rest of the season. Now, some of these players are likely on your waiver wire right now. Now, others, like Arike Ogunbowale, who's a player I mentioned later, definitely rostered in your league. In this case, we'll be looking at if you should be trying to acquire or maybe trade away this player. So let's jump in. First of all, let's start at the center position with a buy, and that's the Dallas Wings' Louisa Geisel-Suter. I hope I said that name right. And she was on a tear in replacing Melissa Smith, and she was becoming a top-level fantasy center in a dry market. That was before she took off to Eurobasket and before the Monday trade of Melissa Smith. More on that later. Geisel-Suter is rostered in just 3.3% of ESPN fantasy leagues, and I think that number should be more like 60%, and I think it will be in a couple of weeks, and here's why. She took Smith's starting spot prior to Eurobasket and finished with 25 ESPN standard fantasy points in 26 minutes in her last outing. Then she left for Eurobasket and has been forgotten on the waiver wire. And I think you should add her now. Geisel-Suter is criminally underrated as a fantasy player. She moves very well for a 6'4 center. She's active as a help defender and does a really good job at denying shots without fouling, which helps her stocks, that's blocks and steals, a pretty important fantasy stat since you get 2 points for each. She's been a good floor spreader as well, 35% three-point shooter. The league's moving more toward big players who can move well and shoot, and Geisel-Suter should continue to get big minutes, especially with Smith now off to Las Vegas. That jumps me into a sell, which is the now Las Vegas Aces' Melissa Smith. Her percentage owned in ESPN leagues is about 70. She was traded to Vegas on Monday, which likely means Kia Stokes loses a lot of her fantasy value, at least in the near future. Will it mean more production for Smith? I've got my doubts. Smith's been averaging career lows this year, and I don't see her getting much more offensive opportunities in Vegas. She hasn't shown to be a big scoring threat as a roller, and Myisha Hines-Allen's ascension made this trade make sense for Dallas. Comparing Smith's and Hines-Allen's minutes in their most recent win over the Mystics, Hines-Allen was more active in pick-and-roll situations as both a scoring and assisting threat, and was more active on the boards as well. Smith is not known as a shot creator. 80% of her shots are assisted, and there won't be many of those coming her way in Las Vegas. Perhaps Smith thrives in an Aces offense that's going to be much more structured with head coach Becky Hammon. However, Kia Stokes spent considerable time setting off-ball or stagger screens in the Vegas offense, and Smith will likely be asked to do the same. And those actions don't lead to any fantasy points. One area Smith could potentially thrive is as a corner three shooter. Stokes and now Smith will find themselves spaced out to one corner a lot offensively. Since Stokes is basically no threat from three, I wonder if the Aces are hoping Smith can return to her 2022 rookie form in Indiana when she shot 38% from beyond the arc. As of now, she's shooting a career low 18% from three. Sometimes a change of scenery leads to different results. Speaking of Hines-Allen, she's a buy for me as she's rostered in just 37% of ESPN fantasy leagues right now. Her path to the starting lineup was paved with the Monday trade, and Hines-Allen was already outperforming Smith on the court. We've discussed this already, so I won't get back into it, but Hines-Allen is an intriguing add right now. However, if you are a Hines-Allen owner, I think this is actually maybe a big sell high moment. Paige Beckers, Dejanay Carrington, and Geisel-Suter, as well as some others, were all out during their win over the Mystics in Hines-Allen's 32-point outing in ESPN Standard Leagues. Combined with the Smith trade, you might be able to get another owner to overpay for Hines-Allen right now. They'll likely be focusing on how Smith's departure creates opportunities for Hines-Allen, rather than how the inevitable return of players at other positions might limit her offensive opportunities going forward. Finally, moving off of the Dallas Wings, I've got a sell for Brittney Griner. Griner put up back-to-back 20-point fantasy games against Minnesota on June 27th, and then New York on June 29th. Griner is 6th overall in scoring among centers this year, but she put up back-to-back 10-point ESPN standard scoring games in those two games right before those 20-plus pointers. Griner's thrived on scoring from the paint her entire career, but her mobility has declined, and that has significantly affected her ability to get to the rim and get good shots off. If you can make a trade to move Griner based off of a few strong games, I think I'd be trying. I started off with a sell on Olivia Nelson-Ododa for the Connecticut Sun, but I finished on a hold. She was briefly benched, but has since returned to the starting lineup alongside Tina Charles in the front court, and she's been a fairly reliable start this year. Like I said, I started with this being a sell, but watching her most recent 17-point fantasy outing against Minnesota on the 29th, I switched to a hold because while Connecticut isn't going anywhere this year, wins and losses don't matter in fantasy. It's all about volume, and I think Nelson-Ododa will continue to be a top 20 forward rest of season based on that, volume. I have my concerns with her tendency to exclusively look for the ball in the post on offense. She also misses out on a few rebounds per game because she gets pushed out of position or has the ball knocked out of her hands. But this is her first year starting, and she'll likely continue to be a main cog in Connecticut's scoring load. I would definitely be searching for trade opportunities, but it's unlikely you're going to find better value on a night-to-night basis elsewhere on waiver ads. Coming back from Eurobasket and Team France, and owned in just 19.5% of ESPN Standard Leagues, I've got a buy for Janelle Salon. Golden State is thriving, and the rookie forward Salon returns from Eurobasket ready to take back her starting role. Now, Julie Van Loo for Golden State got back from Eurobasket only to find out she had been waived, but Salon was playing very well for the Valkyries prior to her leaving. She had put up 3 30-plus point fantasy games in 8 appearances, and she's a forward who moves well and can create her own shot. She also plays well off of screens and showed flashes of potential to maybe be a borderline star in this league. I've got a sell for the Chicago Sky's Haley Van Lith, as Chicago's put Angel on the ball more with Vandersloot gone for the season, and Van Lith has continued to give modest numbers in a bench role. I bring her up because I previously had her as a buy, and I was wrong. But keep her in mind for next year when I think she'll be playing for either Portland or Toronto's expansion teams. As the league continues to add teams, I think Van Lith has a chance to carve out a role. Another sell here is for the free agent Dewana Bonner, and that's because, well, she's still a free agent. She's owned in 70% of leagues, and you may have taken her in the top 20 in your fantasy draft. It didn't work out in Indiana, and wherever she does end up going, she'll be coming off the bench, and it will take some time to fit in. Hopefully the next stop finds her in a better spirit, but depending on your injury list situation, it might be time to cut ways with Bonner. I finish off with a couple of sells for players rostered in over 90% of leagues, so this is more for you looking to trade or staying away on acquiring. My first one for the Golden State Valkyries is Kayla Thornton. I drafted Kayla Thornton 62nd overall in my draft, and to date, she's been forward number 11 in ESPN standard fantasy points. Her rostered rate has gone from about 8% to 90%, and as a Thornton owner, I think it might be time to move on from her. I drafted Thornton with high value in mind, and it's hard to complain about her output, but I think we've maybe seen her peak, and this could be the time to capitalize. With Veronica Burton thriving, and Tiffany Hayes becoming a corner 3 option as a guard, Thornton's output very well could be on the drop. Thornton has thrived in Coach Natalie Nakase's spaced-out offense, keeping shooters on the corner, but her insane output this year has been more about insane volume than production. Thornton was 0 of 5 from 3 when she exited Sunday's win with a neck injury. Her three-point percentage is climbing from the season start, but it still sits at just 28%. Like I mentioned, Tiffany Hayes and Thornton will be playing on opposite corners a lot offensively on the 3, and with Hayes shooting 35% from 3 since her return, I think more of the offensive load will naturally shift her way. Now that being said, Thornton's still a good play the rest of the year. I just think we may have seen the best already. And finally, I've got a sell on Arike Ogunbowale. Now, she's a can't-drop player, so chances are, even if you wanted to cut bait, you wouldn't be able to, and I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying if you're an Ogunbowale owner, you should be looking to sell right now. She had 23 points on Saturday against Washington, and in a 4-game stretch recently, here was her final point output according to ESPN standard scoring. 18 points, 45 points, 41 points, and 13 points. Most of Agumbawale's fantasy production is based on scoring, and Enrique is a textbook freelancer who's going to be as streaky as it gets, and I don't think there's any sign of that changing this year. Her three-point percentage is at an all-time low, 30%, and her low shooting percentage is at least partly due to her taking high degree of difficulty shots. Almost 50% of her shots made are unassisted, and many are usually also well defended. She's an incredible scorer, but she ranks 105th among WNBA players in true shooting percentage, and those numbers don't lie. Additionally, Agumbawale has not been moving well without the ball this year, and she's often seen backtracking to mid-court after her offense puts up a shot. Yeah, we don't expect perimeter guards to rack up rebounds, but this is a big reason why she averages just 2.7 per game. On the defensive side, she has the potential to pick up steals, but is in the lower echelon of all players in blocks, with just 5 on the season. Those stock stats help sustain players in fantasy during cold stretches, not to mention rebounding numbers, and Enrique doesn't offer a ton in these categories. Maybe you can find someone struggling at the guard position and wait for a big game. That could be Thursday if Paige Beckers misses again, and see if maybe you can pick up a forward or maybe even a 2-player deal. I really do think 2, quote, lesser players might be better come playoff time in depth than hoping for a boom and not a bust from Agumbawale. And that's my buys and sells as we head into week 6 of the fantasy season. Good luck in your matchups.